Today we're going to be studying the covenant of fire, Yeshua, in the Torah. This study may be offensive to some. That's because we don't have our own truths. There is only one truth, and that truth is found in the Word of Yah. The scriptures are meant to be searched beyond the simple, literal text, but many today are demanding that the scripture be understood from essentially a kindergarten level perspective. This intentional blindness and deception is spreading through the body of believers in Yeshua. As you can see here is a chart that the rabbis use and the ancient sages use called pardes. That means orchard or garden. Peshat is the simple, literal reading of the text. And that is where we find many today who are denying the Messiah Yeshua within the body of Christians and in the Messianic movement are going to a Peshat level reading and demanding that logic be used to understand scriptures. However, there's also the remez, which is the hint or the suggestion. There's the drash, which is insight. And then there's the sod level of understanding, which is the mystery level, the things that are in the scriptures, not necessarily hidden, but you have to dig for them, but they're there. And it's all part of Yah's word. It's all intended for us to find it and to understand it and to get to know our Father in heaven even better. Now in Isaiah 46:10 we read, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. So he's declared the end from the beginning. Do we take that seriously? Do we search the scriptures to understand what this means? What is he saying to us? If we look at the beginning, can we find the story all the way to the end? I believe that we can. In the very beginning, the first word in Genesis is Bereshit. Reshit has the root word of Rosh, or head, the leader, the ruler. So Bereshit, which is translated in the beginning, is Reshit, and then you add the bait in front of it, which gives us the in the part of the word for beginning. So it's a compounded word, it's a contracted word, meaning in the beginning, all in one word. Now, Barith means covenant. Esh, the aleph, and the shin in the center means fire. So, in the beginning, in the covenant of fire, Reshith, take out the fire and you have the word covenant. So Esh plus Barith gives us the word Bereshith. Now the first letter is Beit. And we know from the Paleo-Hebrew that Beit represents a house. Beit Resh together make the word son. And Beit Aleph Shin is Rosh, the head, the ruler. So in the word Bereshith, we have an entire message encoded into the Hebrew word. From the beginning, the head, the son of the covenant of fire, is declared to us in that Hebrew word. Hebrew is not like any other language. Hebrew, every word in Hebrew, every letter in Hebrew is also a number, also has its own meaning. When you put them together, you find even deeper hidden truths that are there for us to find. When mankind is in covenant with Yah through the Son, the head, the house of the covenant of fire, mankind will carry the fire, the light of Yah within him. That's why you see Esh hidden in the center of the word covenant. Reshith. You take out the Esh and you get Barith, which is covenant. You add the esh back in and you have a covenant of fire, and the fire is in the very center of the word. So what this tells us is that when we're in covenant, there's a fire within us. And when we're outside of covenant with the Father, then it's a devouring fire. And what are we filled with inside of us? If the fire is not within us, the fire is extinguished, it's outside of us, and we're full of darkness. So we either walk in darkness, or we have the fire of Yeshua, of the Father, the Son of the Father, Yeshua, in us, and we are a light. We also see that the covenant is for all of mankind. Mankind has not been created at this point, and yet we are seeing that there is a covenant of fire that is being created. Now, the Son of the covenant, is again declared as the first act of creation when Elohim says, "Let there be," what? Light. Light. What does a fire produce? A fire produces light. And Elohim said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Genesis 1:3. Elohim used spoken words or speech to create the world, to call everything into existence. In Genesis chapter 1, Elohim uses the word called or said 16 different times. Day 1, the very first creative act, Elohim said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And on day 2, Elohim called the firmament heaven, Shamayim. Now the word Shamayim is very similar to Bereshit and Reshit. The word Shamayim is two separate words put together in a contraction. Shama, which we should all know, Shama, which means to hear, to listen, to report, and Mayim, which is water. Shamayim. Hear what the heavens declare. Hear the Son, the light of Elohim, for whom the world was created. The psalmist understood this. In Psalm 19, 1 through 6, we read, "The heavens, Shamayim, declare the glory of Elohim, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech." What is in the firmament that tells us it's daytime? The sun. "And night unto night reveals knowledge." Is there a knowledge in the night that we can understand? Yes. It's called the constellations, the stars that tell the story of salvation from the very beginning. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. What did Elohim use to create the world? His voice. He said, "Let there be light." Their line has gone out through all the earth. Whose line? The sun and the constellations that give us the knowledge of salvation in the story of the stars. And their words to the end of the world. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. To the end of the world. The stars, the constellation, and the sun are all there until the end of the world. And in them hath he set a tabernacle for the sun. What creates a tabernacle for the sun? The constellations. Which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. Who is the bridegroom? The bridegroom is Yeshua. He's compared to the Son of righteousness, with healing on his wings. So we have a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, which is what the sun does, and rejoiceth as a strong man to run a race. His going forth is from one end of the heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it. And there is nothing hid from the heat thereof. The sun has a circuit, and it is a ball of fire, heat. The psalmist understood that we should be listening to the shamayim, the living water that is above, the heavens. We should be listening to what the shamayim is speaking to us. In Sanhedrin 98b, the rabbis say that the world was created for the Messiah. Of course, because it's written in Genesis 1, in Bereshit, in the very first word. We find the sun, the covenant of fire, the head of the house, is prophesied right there in the very opening lines of Genesis. The house of the sun, the ruler of the covenant of fire. So, Shema Israel, we need to listen to what the Father has written into His Word for us to understand. Hear, O Israel, Yah our Elohim, Yah is one. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod, Malchuto Leolam Vayed. We need to listen to everything that the Father is speaking to us. And you shall do what is right and good in the sight of Yah, that it may be well with you. Why do we do what's right and good? So that it is well with us. And Yah commanded us to observe all these statutes, to fear Yah, our Elohim. Why? For our good always. His instructions, His teachings are there for our good. Not because He needs it, but because we need it. It's a hedge of protection for those who are in covenant with the Father. In Genesis 2:8 it says, And Yah Elohim planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there He put the man, Ha-Adam, the man, whom He had formed. So Ha-Adam was created outside of the garden, and then he was placed inside the garden. Living within the garden was not his original state of existence. He didn't earn the privilege to enter into the most sacred place, the Holy of Holies on earth. It was a free gift. It was freely given to him by Elohim, who wished to share a close relationship with mankind, with His creation. Now, the word garden is the word gan, and it means enclosure, an enclosed, fenced area, especially of trees, i.e. an orchard of seed-bearing fruit trees. Remember the word pardes. It means orchard. So there's this understanding that we use that there are many different levels that the Father is speaking to us on. And we need to be diligently seeking and digging up the treasures that He has laid down for us to discover His Son and to know Him better. So the root word ganan means to defend or to surround. So it's an enclosed orchard of seed-bearing fruit trees in the Garden of Eden. That's what it is. It's a holy and set-apart place where Yah's presence could dwell and meet with the Adam. So we find the Adam dwelled in the holy place, the place of the presence of Elohim, and he was given two primary responsibilities, to abad and shamar. And Yah Elohim took the man, Ha-Adam, and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it, the word abad, and to keep it. Now, to dress the garden is the word abad, to serve another, to make oneself a servant. The New Testament uses the term bond servant, to choose to serve, which means you have to have a choice. You can't freely choose to serve unless you're given a choice. Elohim could have left Ha-Adam, the Adam, outside of the Garden of Eden with his instructions to serve and to keep, and therefore prove himself worthy of entering into the sacred, holy, set-apart place of the covenant of fire. But this was not the covenant that Yah made with mankind. Instead, Elohim breathed his spirit into the Adam. This earthen vessel made of the dust of the earth was filled with the breath or the spirit of Elohim. The Adam was created to be a living testimony of Elohim on the earth below, created in his image and likeness to perform his instructions. That is what Adam was created to do. That is what mankind was created to do. So imagine, if you will, that you were to see the Adam walking through the garden before he sinned, when he was in a state of perfection, hearing and serving only Yah day and night, guarding his instructions. Could you rightly say in that moment that you had seen the image of the invisible Elohim on the earth through the Adam, his follower, his bondservant? Something to think about. And Yah Elohim took the man, Ha-Adam, and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it, abad, and to keep it. That's the word shamar, to keep. It's a primitive root word, properly to hedge about, in order to guard it, to protect, to be a watchman. Now again, we have two words into one. Shamar is the word shama, hear, and mar, master. What are we supposed to do? Shamar. We're supposed to hear the master and abad. Serve only the master. From the beginning, mankind's whole duty to Yah was to serve and to guard Yah's instructions with our whole souls, minds, and bodies. We read this in Ecclesiastes 12:13. Let us hear, Shema, the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear Elohim and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Why would he say this? He says this because we understand that from the story of Ha-Adam in the garden, to abad and to shamar. That is our duties, to abad and to shamar the master. Now in Genesis 1, Elohim creates a covenant of fire with mankind. Then Elohim creates a covenant of marriage for the Adam by taking out of Adam a special helpmeet just for him, his wife. Now if you notice that up to this point that she is not named, it is the man and the wife. Now Adam has a picture of his relationship with Elohim in the separate but still part of himself relationship with the wife, the woman. Just as Elohim guards the Adam is to guard and protect the relationship that he has with his wife, the woman. It's a picture of the relationship that Ha-Adam had with the Father. Separate, but the Spirit of the Father within him. So marriage is also a covenant of fire between a man and a woman. If you look at the word ish, you have aleph, yod, shin. And if you look at the word isha, you have aleph, shin, hey. If you take out the yod and the hey from Ish and Isha, Yod Hey, we know that that is Yah, Yahweh. And what are you left with? You're left with only the Aleph and the Sheen in both Ish and in the word Isha. The Aleph and the Sheen represent the word Esh, which is fire. So if you take Yah out of the marriage, whether the man is devoid of Yah in him or the female is devoid of Yah in her, you are left with a consuming fire. What should be a fire within the marriage, which brings light, now is outside of the marriage, and it will devour the people within the marriage. It's a devouring fire. Now, from the beginning, mankind has always had a choice between being in covenant or out of covenant with our Creator. Elohim has made this offer of covenant repeatedly throughout the scriptures because he desires to be in covenant with all of mankind. All of mankind came from the Adam and the woman, the wife. All of mankind descended from them. And he initially started out in covenant with the Adam and the wife. So they were in covenant until they broke covenant. So if you were a descendant of the Adam and the wife, if you were a human being on the earth today, there's a covenant that was always intended for you. Always meant for you specifically. And each time Elohim has made the offer of covenant, he never required anyone to earn entrance into the covenant. You can't earn a gift. It was a free gift. Adam did nothing to earn it. He was placed in the sacred, set-apart, holy place, Gan Eden, and he was in covenant until he broke covenant and left covenant. Now we find in Genesis 2:9 that there are two trees in the midst of the Garden of Eden. And out of the ground made Yah Elohim to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So there's two trees in the garden, but notice that every tree in the garden is pleasant to the sight and good for food. You know what that means? That means that the tree of the learning, as it's put in the Septuagint, the tree of the learning of good and evil was pleasant to the sight, and guess what? It was good for food. Both trees provided fruit that was pleasing to look upon and looked delicious, and it probably was delicious. But the fruit or the seed of one tree brought life, the tree of life. And the fruit and the seed of the other tree, the tree of the learning of good and evil, produced only death. And the Adam had a free will choice to serve and to guard the covenant or to break the covenant. In Genesis 2, verses 16 through 17, it says, "And Yah Elohim commanded the Adam, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat." So he tells the man, you can freely eat of any tree in this garden. But then he adds a caveat. "But of the tree of the learning of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it. For in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die." Muth, surely die. Which literally translates, dying, you will die. It's Hebraism. It's an infinitive absolute. It doesn't mean to drop dead, but the sentence of dying will begin and will end with literal death. So this is something that you could imagine someone being given the death sentence. The judge rules, he gives them the death sentence, but they don't drop dead immediately. they're not executed immediately. They have a period of time where they're essentially the walking dead. They've already been sentenced to die and will die eventually at some predetermined point. So compare this word, the use of these words, muth, to Numbers 26:65. For Yahweh has said of them, they, meaning Israel, shall die, muth, in the wilderness. They were given a 40-year sentence, actually 38 years, during which all physically died. All the men of war, all those who had grumbled against Elohim, all of those people were sentenced to die, and within 40 years, the sentence was carried out on all of them. Here comes the serpent. Yea, hath Elohim said, ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? So he gets the wife, the woman, off by herself. Now, was the woman present when Elohim commanded the man? No, the woman hadn't even been created yet. That happened before the man, the Adam, named all of the animals. And then a helpmeet was not found for him, and the woman was then created. So the woman was not there, at least not anywhere in Scripture can we find that the woman was present when the commandment was given to the Adam, the man. So the woman is standing there, and the serpent shows up and says, hasn't Yahweh said you can eat of every tree in the garden? And the woman responds, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, the orchard, but of the fruit of the trees which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim hath said, ye shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it or strike it in Hebrew, lest ye die. Pen muth. So she doesn't say muth, she changes it and says pen muth. And in addition to that, she changes the commandment to neither shall ye touch it. So pen means beware or peradventure. And the root word is pana, to turn towards. Neither to touch or to strike it, beware you turn to die, or beware you die. This is in the absolute definitive sense of dropping dead. Like you physically touch something and you die immediately. But that's not what Elohim had said to the Adam, Ha-Adam. So let's recap. The serpent says, didn't Elohim say you cannot eat of every tree in the garden? This is a true statement. Think about it. This is actually a true statement. Because it says that Elohim commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat. Genesis 2:16. So yes, that is what Elohim said. However, the serpent conveniently ignores an important detail. He completely leaves out the caveat, the commandment. But of the tree of the learning of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it. For in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt muth, surely die. So this is a truth with a huge omission. There's a huge omission of truth here. So the serpent said unto the woman, you shall not surely muth, for Elohim doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as Elohim, knowing good and evil. Now, the second part of the statement is 100% true. It is a truth. And we see this later in Genesis 3:22 when Elohim said, behold, the man is become as one of us to know good and evil. So did the serpent lie about what would happen? Partially yes and partially no. So the serpent focuses the woman's attention, the wife's attention, on that which Elohim had forbidden. She doesn't just see the fruit. In the Hebrew, it shows that she focused intently upon the fruit. Then the serpent directly challenges the commandment delivered by Ha'adam, the husband, when he says, "Did Elohim say?" The serpent knows that the commandment was not given directly to the woman, but it was given through her husband to the woman. So what he's really saying in this very short sentence is, can she really trust her husband? Did Ha'adam express the image and will of the invisible Elohim correctly? Is she sure about that? Did Elohim really say that? And then we see that either the woman or Ha'adam added to the commandment given by Elohim, creating two commandments where there was only one given. I believe, and this is my personal belief, I believe that the woman is the one who added to the commandment. And the reason I believe that is because the woman is a picture of Israel. And this is an inclination of Israel. That's why in Deuteronomy, he warns against adding or taking away. It gets you into trouble, but for some reason, mankind likes to add or to take away. And it puts us on very dangerous ground when we do this. So the woman makes void the plain instruction of the commandment by adding her own man-made doctrine or dogma. And it becomes a mixture of truth and a flat-out lie. Because Elohim never said anything about don't touch it. That's not in there. She added to the commandment and thereby made the commandment void. The serpent does not lie when he says that you won't surely die from touching the fruit, because it was never part of the commandment. However, the serpent does lie because he knows that eating the fruit will surely result in a death sentence, although not immediate physical death. But when she violates the man-made doctrine and remains unharmed, she will gain confidence to transgress the true commandment. The serpent suggests that Elohim is intentionally keeping something good from her through the commandment, restraining her somehow from realizing her own true potential. So now the woman questions not only the husband who delivered the commandment, but also the motives of the Elohim who spoke the commandment. Is the commandment really an unfair bondage? Could she too achieve a higher status and become like Elohim? Could she be the one to give commandment? Let's look at the serpent's tactics. Truth, but omits crucial information when he says, hasn't Elohim said you can eat of every tree in the garden? And then a lie, you will not surely die, muth muth, have a death sentence. And then another truth, for Elohim doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as Elohim, knowing good and evil. So here we have two truths with a lie planted right into the center of it. Imagine it's like the covenant with the fire of Elohim right in the center. Here he's directly attacking the fire of Elohim by giving two truths surrounding a deadly lie. Now we see the justification process of disobedience in Genesis 3:6. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise. So what is she thinking? What is the process that's going on here? Well, number one, she's seeing that it's good for food. So she's looking at it from a physical perspective. It's good for food. It's prudent. It's useful. Hey, it's food. She's also looking at it on an emotional level because it's pleasant to the eyes. She's observing it and she's contemplating how pleasant it is. It's emotionally appealing to her. And on the third level is a mental level. To make one wise, a higher state of enlightenment is available to her. Something that she's being deprived of. Something that would make her reach a higher level of potential. So the woman puts her own logic and intellect above the word of Yah Elohim. She wants more than what she has already been blessed with in the Garden of Eden. It seems crazy to us. She's living in paradise. She has no idea how blessed she is. But it's not enough. There's something more that she could obtain in her own mind. She wants to become like Elohim, and then she can make her own rules. So the more she contemplates the benefits of sin, the less she fears Elohim. And the less fear she has for Elohim, the greater her desire for sin grows within her. It says in Ecclesiastes 8:13, "But it shall not be well with the wicked, neither shall he prolong his days, which are as a shadow, because he feareth not before Elohim." So the more that she focused on her flesh and her lusts of the flesh, the things of the earth, the less fear she had of her Creator. In 1 John 2:15 through 16 we read, "Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. For if any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world." So look at this list. Number one, physical, lust of the flesh. What does Genesis 3 say? It was good for food. Number two, emotionally appealing, the lust of the eyes. In Genesis it says pleasant to the eyes. And number three, the mental appeal, pride of life. Or in Genesis 3, to make one wise. So the dust of the earth wants only the things of the earth. In 1 John 2:17, he continues on and says, "And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof, but he that doeth the will of Elohim abideth forever." So let's remember that Ha'adam and the wife are made of two ingredients, the dust of the earth and the spirit of Elohim, which is breathed into them. There's a fire that is put within them, and they are in covenant with Yah Elohim in the holy set-apart Garden of Eden. And what happens is that the dust of the earth wants the things of the world, and the spirit of Elohim wants the things of Elohim. So there's a choice that has to be made, and that choice is represented between the tree of the learning of good and evil and the tree of life. You choose the spirit, you walk in the spirit, and you serve, you abide, and you guard and protect. You hear the master and do what he says, and you walk in the spirit. Or you walk after the dust of the earth, your flesh, and you choose the things of the earth, along with the lusts and the evil inclination that we all have, to find sin appealing. And what happens is when you focus intently on sin, when you don't rebuke it and say, "No, that is not of the Spirit, that is not of the heavens, I will not do that, that's against the will of my Father." But when you contemplate sin, what happens? The fear of Elohim is diminished. And the lust of your flesh and the worldly things grows within you until it overcomes all fear of Elohim. But he that doeth the will of Elohim abideth forever. So when you walk in the Spirit, you walk in obedience. If you are claiming to be in the Spirit and walking in disobedience to the instructions of Elohim, then, as John says, you're a liar and there's no truth in you. Because it's impossible. We see it right here in Genesis chapter 3. We see where sin cracks open the door to death through the woman. She took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her. So death enters through the Adam. Ha-Adam, the man, is when death enters. Because it says, and he did eat in Genesis 3:6. Now, with her is the Hebrew word im, and it can also mean in relationship, meaning joined together in the context of being in fellowship or in relationship with someone, not necessarily physically present with someone. So you could properly say, I'm with my spouse, or my spouse and I are together for 10 years, regardless if the person, your spouse, is anywhere in the vicinity of where you are. You are in relationship with him. You are with your boyfriend, with your husband. Now, we see that the woman in Genesis 3 never speaks to Ha-Adam anywhere in this account. However, Yah later rebukes the Adam for hearkening to the voice of the woman. He doesn't accuse him of hearkening to the voice of the serpent. So we know that something happened here that is not related in the story. Somehow the woman spoke to the Adam and convinced him, not the serpent. And I showed a picture of figs here in this picture because the fig tree, or the fig, is the only fruit mentioned in the entire account of the Garden of Eden. Specifically, the only fruit mentioned. Here is a spiritual concept that we find in the New Testament repeatedly, and it's called the law of sin and death. That sin brings death and judgment and separation from us and the Father. So the fire that is within us is quenched, and now there's only a fire outside of us, a devouring fire, which will devour those out of covenant on Judgment Day. For sin, taking occasion by the commandment, deceived me, and by it slew me. Romans 7:11. Here, Paul is directly comparing himself to the woman and sin to the serpent. For sin, the serpent, taking occasion by the commandment, not commandments, commandment. There was one commandment. Deceived me. What happened to the woman, the wife? She was deceived. And by it slew me. Is deception dangerous? Yes, it's very dangerous. It will kill you. So what is sin? In 1 John 3:4 we read, whoever committeth sin transgresseth also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law. The law simply means Torah, which is instructions. The teachings, the instructions, the things that the husband spoke to the wife, which she ignored and transgressed against and was held responsible because those were the words of the Father. She was held responsible for not listening and hearkening to the words of the Father spoken through the Adam, her husband. So we see that death entered into the world through the door of the one sin committed by one man, the Adam. And all who descended through the Adam were born guilty and outside of the covenant. Wherefore, as by one man, the Adam, sin, which is disobeying the commandment, entered into the world, and death by sin, going through the open door that sin opened for death. And so death passed upon all men, and for that reason, all have sinned. We are all born guilty of sin, every one of us. We read that without the law, death reigns, although the specific sin, eating the forbidden fruit in this case, is not imputed or specifically assigned to those who never had access to eat from the tree of the learning of good and evil. It didn't matter whether or not the children of the Adam and the wife ever ate of the tree. They were born guilty of that sin. For until the law, sin was in the world. But sin is not imputed when there's no law. Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over them that had not sinned, after the similitude of Adam's transgression, who is the figure of him that was to come. So we see that word imputed means to distinguish between individuals sinning or not sinning. Sin was not imputed when there was no law. Everybody was guilty, and everybody was under the death penalty. It didn't matter. Because death entered all mankind through one man, thereby all have sinned, so also can life enter into mankind through one man, so that all can live. Now we read on here in Genesis 3:7. And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. They knew that they were naked. That's the word arum. Nudity, nakedness, naked, a sense of helplessness. Now, arum also comes from the same root word, and it means properly to make bare, but used only in the derivative sense, through the idea perhaps of smoothness, to be cunning, usually in a bad sense, to deal subtly. If someone is a smooth talker, they're cunning, they're crafty. So in Genesis 3:1 we read, now the serpent was more subtle, arum, than any beast of the field which Yah Elohim had made. So initially, before sin and death, it says, and they were both naked, arum, the man and his wife, and they were not ashamed. They were not bush, meaning they weren't disappointed, they weren't disconcerted or troubled, they weren't afraid, they weren't without hope or expectation. They were arum. But after sin and death, it says, and they heard, the word shama, the voice of Yah Elohim walking, halak, in the garden in the cool, the ruach of the day. And the Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Yah Elohim amongst the trees of the garden. So halak is where we get halakha, which is proper walking in the commandments, properly keeping the commandments. And it says in Psalm 1:1, blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly. So here we have Yah Elohim walking in righteousness through the garden. And it says they shema the voice of Elohim walking. So his voice was walking. They heard his voice walking in the cool, the ruach of the day. He's in the Spirit, and he's walking correctly in the garden. And when they see this, when they realize this, what do? They hide themselves from him, because now they are naked and ashamed. They've just tried to cover themselves with fig leaves. So they know that something has drastically changed. And it's also interesting that the word amongst is the same word that is in the midst of the garden. So they hid themselves in the midst of the trees of the garden. So they're still at the tree, or in the near vicinity of the tree that they were forbidden to eat off of. And this is where Yah Elohim finds them. And it says, "And Yah Elohim called unto the Adam, and said unto him, Where art thou? And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked, and I hid myself." So now the Adam and the wife are afraid. And instead of being merely a room, they have become a room, like the serpent, acting craftily. They're hiding from him. And very shortly, we're going to see them begin to act like the adversary, the accuser, when they begin to cast blame. Also note that Yah addresses the Adam first, because that is who he left in charge of the entire garden. Now the man says, "The woman who thou gavest to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat." And Yah Elohim said unto the woman, "What is this that thou hast done?" And the woman says, "The serpent beguiled me, he deceived me, and I did eat." Now the woman blames the serpent's trickery for transgressing the instruction, the word of Yah, given to her through her husband. But the reality is she was led astray by her own lusts. And she's still held accountable for not obeying Yah's direct instruction. Note here is the spiritual hierarchy which Yah established from the beginning through the prophets of righteousness like Noah and Moses and Elijah, etc., those who he sends to speak his instructions and his words to the woman, which is a picture of Israel. You are held accountable for what he says to you through these prophets. Now, in Genesis 3:12, and the man said, "The woman whom thou gavest to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat." So the Adam essentially blames Elohim for giving him the woman. After all, a man's got to eat whatever the woman gives him, right? "That we be no more children, tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive." Who is Ephesians 4:14 comparing these evil men? They're comparing them to the serpent in the garden. Cunning, crafty, lying in wait to deceive others. You're going to find in the New Testament, it's talking about the Garden of Eden many, many times. It's a popular theme in the New Testament. And here's a picture of the Adam throwing the wife under the bus, blaming her for his own actions instead of taking responsibility. So death had not entered into the creation, but the woman was in sin and transgression of the law and fully deceived when she spoke to the Adam. So before the Adam ate, death had not entered. So the woman is walking in deception. She is serving the desires of the world rather than listening to the Spirit of Yah. Now, the Adam, knowing that she had sinned and was therefore consumed with worldly, fleshly lust, should never have listened to her. He should have recognized her plight and sought Yah for a solution. Imagine if the Adam had said, "No, you're deceived and you don't even know it. I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to intercede for you with the Father." Like Moses did for the children of Israel, begging Yah for mercy on the behalf of the wife. This is why Moses is also a picture of the Messiah, a spirit-filled picture of the husband seeking reconciliation between the father and the woman, the wife. So here's another spiritual principle. You cannot save someone by joining them in their sin. What is the proper response? To pray for one another, to intercede on the behalf of a brother. So this is a huge fall. From reflecting the image of Elohim and walking confidently and uprightly with Elohim in the commandment, to suddenly reflecting the image of the serpent and fearing Elohim's judgment. Because they had been given life as a gift. The serpent convinced the woman, and then she convinced the Adam, that they didn't need to Shema, hear, and obey the Word of Yah. They were convinced that the commandment itself was keeping them in bondage from achieving their full potential of becoming divine beings. So now we see the judgment of the serpent and the Adam. To the serpent, Yah says, "Thou art cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life." And to the Ha'adam, "Cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life." Do you see a direct parallel between the judgment on the serpent and the judgment on the man? He continues on, "Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face thou shalt eat bread, till thou return unto the ground. For out of it wast thou taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return." So abad, we talked about before, to serve, is a dual meaning word, and it can also mean forced servitude, a state of bondage. Therefore, Elohim sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to abad the ground, the Adamah. This is where we get the root word is Adam, Adamah, from whence he was taken according to the curse. So now, just like the serpent, mankind now serves, in the sense of bondage, the lusts of his own flesh, the carnal nature, instead of Yah. The Adam chose to step out of the covenant. And the curse of stepping out of the covenant is that now he will serve the flesh. He will serve the things of the world. And he will try and struggle to get bread to eat. Before, he didn't need to struggle to get bread to eat. But now, he will have to struggle to get the bread of life, what he needs to physically live. Now look at the judgment of the serpent and the woman, or the wife. "And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed," singular seed, "and zerah," plural seed. So we have between thy, meaning you, seed, zerah, plural, and her seed, zerah, plural. And he shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. So in the first part, there's both sides that have a seed. The serpent will have a seed, and the woman will have a seed. And it's a plurality. It's multiple seed. And in the next part, he, which is the word who, it's a masculine singular word found only in the Torah. Outside the Torah, it can be a feminine word. But in the Torah, it is only a masculine singular word. He, meaning singular, one person, one seed, shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. We're talking about one person is the seed. So the judgment of the woman and the wife continues. Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, the plural seed, and thy desire, teshuka, shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule, mashal, over thee. Now, the word desire is teshuka, and it means to long for, to stretch out after. And to rule over thee is the word mashal, and it means dominion or rule, in the sense of rulers or princes or a judge passing judgment or sentencing upon her. So what this is telling us is that the wife will deeply desire her husband, singular, and the one she is reaching out for, the husband, will be her judge. So the seed, the Messiah, this is talking about the Messiah, which the woman and her descendants desires, will also be her judge. The Messiah will come, and he will also judge her. So the woman represents the righteous and the unrighteous people of Yah Elohim. The be fruitful and multiply plural seed of the woman, which is represented through the unrighteous line of Cain and the righteous line of Seth. And the constant winnowing of the descendants, multiplying the descendants and then dividing the descendants, multiplying and then dividing them, ultimately separating out a righteous people for himself in the last days. So Yah Elohim freely betrothed Israel without making her earn the covenant first. It was a gift, just like it was a gift in the very beginning with the Adam. It says in Ezekiel 16, 8 through 14, Then I passed by you and saw you, and behold, you were at the time for love. So I spread my skirt over you and covered your nakedness. I also swore to you and entered into a covenant with you so that you became mine, declares Yah Elohim. Now, the concept of covering your nakedness, entering into a covenant with an entire nation of people, the seed of the woman, is a marriage covenant. We see the same concept in Ruth chapter 3, verse 9, where she says, Spread therefore thy skirt over thine handmaiden, for thou art a near kinsman. She's talking to Boaz. Ruth is a Gentile. Boaz is an Israelite. He's in the direct descendancy for David and all the way down to the Messiah Yeshua. And we see the spreading or covering is promised through a kinsman redeemer. Someone who comes from your family will redeem you, a near kinsman. In Isaiah 54:5, For your husband is your maker, whose name is Yah of hosts, and your redeemer is the Holy One of Israel, who is called the Elohim of all the earth. Who is the Redeemer? It is the kinsman Redeemer who will come through the seed of David. There's a kinsman Redeemer who is also called the Holy One of Israel, who is called the Elohim of all the earth. It's right there. They understood these things. So Israel is the woman longing and reaching out for her husband, the promised seed, the kinsman redeemer, the Holy One of Israel, the Mashiach, who will bring Yah's compassion and mercy and fairly judge and rule over her. So we have the serpent versus the Messiah right there in Genesis 3. And in Daniel 11:37 we read, "Neither shall he regard the Elohim of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any Elohim, for he shall magnify himself above all." So the anti-Messiah seed will not regard the Elohim of his fathers, nor the desire of women, which is what? What is the wife's desire? The woman's desire is for her Messiah, her Mashiach, nor regard any Elohim. This message, this anti-Messiah message, is being taught today as the serpent is sifting the camps and the churches. The spirit of anti-Messiah will not hear the Elohim of his fathers. He's not going to listen to this. He's going to reject all of this and go in his own logic and his own understanding. He's going to praise his intellect and the work of his hands. He will not hear or regard the desire for a Messiah. There is no Messiah. Show me a Messiah in Scripture. There's no such thing. And he will not bow to any Elohim but himself, worshiping only his earthly intellect, lust, and logic. He wants to be Elohim. He cannot be Elohim if he regards the words of Elohim. He has to ignore them. So we see that the wife desires her husband. The seed represents a second Adam. The masculine pronoun he, which will wound the head of the serpent, and you, the serpent, will wound his heel. His heel. So this is talking about a single individual. This shows us that another showdown would occur where the promised seed would be victorious over the serpent, who had been victorious over the woman. So the Adam was in the image of his father Yahweh Elohim. Therefore, the seed will be born out of the woman's descendants, a kinsman redeemer, but in the image of Elohim, like the Adam was born, filled with the Spirit. Remember, there's two things the Adam was made out of: the dust of the earth and the Spirit that was breathed into him. So the seed, the promised Messiah, will be a kinsman redeemer, restoring life, just as the first Adam brought death to all creation. The second Adam will know that the woman is deceived. He'll know it, and he will intercede for her with compassion and with mercy on her behalf, just as Moses did for the children of Israel in the wilderness, thereby redeeming the woman as a near kinsman of her close relatives. Now, there's a Torah principle where it shows us that the husband can bear the iniquity of the wife. The husband can bear the iniquity of the wife. We read in Numbers 30, "And if she vowed in her husband's house, or bound her soul by a bond with an oath, and her husband heard it, and held his peace at her, and disallowed her not, then all her vows shall stand, and every bond wherewith she bound her soul shall stand. Did the woman bound her soul to the serpent in the garden when she disobeyed and hearkened to the voice of the serpent? Yes, she did. But if her husband hath utterly made them void on the day he heard them, then whatsoever proceeded out of her lips concerning her vows or concerning the bond of her soul shall not stand. Her husband hath made them void, and get this, Yah shall forgive her. For every vow and every binding oath to afflict the soul, her husband may establish it, or her husband may make it void. Now we know that the Adam established the oath with death when he also ate of the fruit. He made a covenant with death by eating the fruit. Now, reading here in Numbers 30, 14, and 15. But if her husband altogether hold his peace at her from day to day, and then he establisheth all her vows, or all her bonds, which are upon her, he confirmeth them, because he held his peace at her in the day that he heard them. But if he shall anyways make them void after he hath heard them, then he shall bear her iniquity. So if he holds his peace, which means to scratch, to engrave, to fabricate or devise in a bad sense, and the bonds that the woman is in bonds, an obligation from, to tie, to bind, to be imprisoned. The woman was imprisoned by deception. And we have the word iniquity, perversity, fault, punishment of iniquity, sin, what the woman did in the garden. According to the law, the husband, the Adam, could have voided the bondage which she had taken upon herself. But later, when the husband had established the vow by participating fully with the woman and realized his mistake, it was too late. The Adam blames Yah for giving him the woman, and the woman for giving him the fruit. So the carnal, worldly nature refused to accept blame for its own sins and the consequences. It is the action of the serpent, it is the action of the accuser, the adversary, to blame others. So the Adam condemns the wife for both of their sins, and thereby puts all of the iniquity upon himself in the garden. So it is all about the woman. Hate to tell you guys, I'm so sorry, but it's all about the woman. And of course the woman is Israel, which includes men and women. So the Adam was responsible before Yah for his house, the garden, the commandment, and his wife. When the woman transgressed, he had the option to cover her sin, and Yah would have forgiven her. Death, if you recall, didn't enter until he also ate of the forbidden fruit and also transgressed the law, thereby making the covenant with death himself. The Adam named the animals which were under his rule before the woman was taken out of himself. But notice that the Adam never named the woman, as she was part of himself. They were echad, they were one. She was essentially a co-ruler, a helpmeet. There was an equality between them. They each had their own duties. But when they sinned, the one flesh was severed between Yah and the woman, and Adam and the woman. Because the Adam will rule and judge the woman, he then names her prophetically, Hava. So the Adam is never named. It is always in the Hebrew, Ha-Adam, the Adam, which means mankind. So what is the name of the seed of the woman, the kinsman redeemer, who is called the Holy One of Israel? That is the question that everyone must answer. Now, continuing on with the woman. Sin caused the Adam to view himself apart from his wife. Remember, they were one flesh. But now they've sinned, and now it's her versus him. And he ultimately passed an unfair judgment in order to cover himself and to shift the blame. After the fall, the Adam names the woman because he will now rule or pass judgment over her, which he does unjustly as part of his carnal, fallen nature. That's what he did right in front of Yah Elohim. So he now has dominion over the woman, just as he did over the beasts of the field and the animals. The most basic struggle in marriages is to become one flesh by covering one another versus becoming the accuser of one another, being arum, crafty, and naked like Hasatan, the adversary, the accuser. Proverbs says that hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all sins. The seed, which will come from the woman's seed, the descendants, a kinsman redeemer, will cover the sins of the woman out of love, bearing the full iniquity and responsibility upon himself. Therefore, a powerful tactic of the serpent is to hide the truth from the woman, keep her from discovering the covering which was prepared for her from the foundation of the world. The serpent is lost. The only way he can make us lose is if he can make us disregard the covering that was provided for us to be back in covenant, to have the fire of Yah within us instead of a devouring fire without us. So Adam called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living. Her name is prophetic. Havah, plural seed, meaning living, a family or a tribe. A family or a tribe is pictured in the woman in her descendants. The root word is Havah, which has the letter Vav, which means a nail. It means to secure something. So the root word Havah has the nail. And it means to make known, to declare, or to breathe. What did Yah do? He breathed into Adam life. Havah. So compare Havah and Hayah. Hayah with the letter Yod, which means an arm or a hand. It means to revive, to quicken. The right arm of Elohim. And Havah, the family or the tribe, with the nail that secures them in the covenant. So from the family or the tribe will come the arm of Yah to revive and to quicken to life. From the family will come the nail to secure them. So the mother is the word M, a parting of the way, a parting of the road, a great city. And we will see these two paths taking shape in the first two sons of the woman in Genesis chapter 4. But let's get back to what is his name. What is the name of the seed? This is the question that Moses asked when he was sent to Egypt and delivered Israel from bondage, which represented the forced servitude of the woman to the evil ruler, Hasatan, of this world. And Moses said unto Elohim, Behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, The Elohim of your fathers has sent me unto you, and they shall say to me, What is his name? What shall I say unto them? What is the name of the Holy One of Israel, the promised seed, the kinsman redeemer, the he of Genesis 3:15, the word who, which is found spelled in this specific way only in the Torah. And Elohim said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. That's in Exodus 3:14. I am that I am. And Elohim said unto Moses, I am that I am. Ehiyah asher ehiyah. And thus thou shalt say unto the children of Israel, Ehiyah has sent me unto you. Actually, Ehiyah asher ehiyah translates to I will be who I will be. Asher is the word who I will be. And Hayah means to be, to exist, to breathe. So literally he's saying, I will be who I will be. I exist. Tell them, Ehiyah, I exist, has sent you. Now, Yahweh is how we normally pronounce it. Yahuwah, Yahweh. There's many different ways that people pronounce this name. And it's actually an unpronounceable name for a very good reason. Because it's not a proper name. It's actually what we would consider today to be a contraction or perhaps an acronym in English. Who, the he, the seed of Genesis 3:15, the hey, vav, aleph, which is the hand or the arm, the nail, the leader, he. So when we see yod hey, vav hey, it means literally I existed, I exist, I will exist. So the yod hey will be, the vav is, and the hey was. So the divine presence plus time references. Yod hey future, vav present, hey past or eternal. So hayah, hoveh, yihiyah is yod hey, vav hey. It's not actually a name, it's a contraction. So we can stop fighting about how to pronounce it. We don't need to be Pharisees. It's a beautiful name, but it is not essentially a proper name. So here, when we look at the different ways that Elohim is mentioned in Scripture, we know that the Aleph, which is the number 1, represents the number 26, because the Aleph is 2 yods with a vav, a slanted vav, right through the center. So 2 yods is 10 plus 10, which equals 20, plus a vav, which is the number 6, is 26. Now, yod hey vav hey is a yod 10, hey 5, vav 6, hey 5. Also is number 26. Now, aleph is spelled aleph lamed pei. And when you add that together, you have aleph 1, lamed 30, pei 80. It equals 111, which is a picture of oneness. Elohim is echad, 111. Now, when we take the he, the who in Genesis 3, that word equals 12. Plus Father, Abba, Aleph, Beit, Yod, is 13. So when we put it all together, we get the number 25. Now notice that you're missing 1 Aleph for a total of 26, because Aleph is the number 1. So he plus Father plus Aleph equals 26, or your 111, which depicts the oneness of our Elohim. In Jewish tradition, the 2 names Elohim and Yehovah represent 2 characteristics of Elohim. There is Elohim, the absolute justice, which is what we see leading from Jacob back to Isaac, back to Abraham, all the way back to creation. We have the flood. There's an absolute justice that is given there. That is one characteristic. And the Yehovah is justice, softened with grace and compassion. prefigured in Moshe, in Moses, and going forward. Death reigned until Moses, when the Yehovah was revealed. That part of Yah's characteristic was revealed. That's in the Midrash Rabbah. The divine presence reveals himself in different ways through the 3 ages of mankind. This is also a traditional understanding. There's 3 ages of mankind. 2,000 plus 2,000 plus 2,000 for a total of 6,000 years, or the 6 days of creation when mankind was created. And that's a picture of the future, the present, and the past, just like the name Yod He Vav He. This is why the ancients were expecting the Messiah to appear by the end of the 4th day, when the great light was placed above the earth. The great light, a picture of Yeshua, the Son, the bridegroom, for whom the tabernacle was created, or as the rabbis say, the entire world was created for the Messiah. Now, who hath ascended up into heaven, or descended? Who hath gathered the wind in his fists? Who hath bound the waters in a garment? Who hath established all the ends of the earth? What is his name, and what is his son's name? Who? The seed, if thou canst tell. Proverbs 30, verse 4 challenges you. What is his name? Do you know his name? Remember, that's a 3rd person masculine singular. It is referring to the seed. Who? The seed. Oftentimes rabbis, ancient rabbis, refer to this messianic figure as Messiah ben Yosef. He is the messianic marker for the one who I am. The one who wounds and is wounded by the serpent. Here in Psalms 81, 4 and 5, we read, "For this was a statute for Israel and a law of the Elohim of Jacob. This he ordained in Joseph for a testimony when he went out through the land of Egypt, where I heard a language that I understood not." Now, Egypt is a picture of the world, the Gentiles, those who are out of the covenant. But in this particular verse, the name Yosef is changed and has the messianic marker added to his name. It is Yehusef. Yehusef. Yehoseph, Yehusef. It is the messianic marker. Now, who did Joseph go to? Joseph went to the Gentiles, not because he wanted to. He was sold by his own family. His brothers sold him and sent him out against his will. He was forced out to the Gentiles, to a land where he didn't understand the language. He was given a Gentile name, and his family thought he's dead, he's gone. And then Joseph, Yehusef, the testimony, was revealed to his family, to his brothers, as the second in command of the land of Egypt. They bowed to him. Mortal men who represent Yahweh upon the earth. That's a picture of Joseph, Yehusef. Joshua is not Yeshua. The second in command of Moshe, of Moses, is not the prophet that is being promised by Moses. But he points us directly to Yeshua. How do we know that? Because his Hebrew name, Yahushua has the messianic marker in it. Just as Joseph's proper name was Yosef, and here his name is Yehusef, also the name Yahushua, the proper name is Yeshua. You take the messianic marker out, and who do you have? You have Yeshua, who was sent by the Father to his brothers. And what did the brothers do? They cast him out, and he was sent to the Gentiles, was given a Gentile name. Everybody knows the name of the Messiah. It's Jesus, according to the Gentiles, because that's the name he's known under. Jesus. But his real name is Yeshua, the prophet like Moses, the kinsman redeemer who came up and was rejected. But when his brothers finally recognize him, when they finally see him, and they say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, blessed is he who comes in the name of Adonai. When they say that, they discover that it's Yosef, who is now the second in command, the ruler of the world, the ruler of Egypt, second in command after the Pharaoh. These are all messianic prophecies. It's right here in Scripture. Haya asher haya. I am who I am. King David is also a messianic figure. The rabbis refer to prophecies of earthly domain and kingship as Messiah ben David. Why is he a picture of the Adam? Because the Adam was given dominion over the world. He is a messianic figure. If you read here in Psalms 139:15, it says, My substance was not hid from thee. My frame was not hidden from thee. I who, Asher, was wrought in secret and curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth, the dust of the earth. Messiah ben Joseph and Messiah ben David are the same figure. The Son of Yah, the second Adam, from whom all can have eternal life again. He fulfills two roles. One, Messiah ben Joseph, compassion and mercy, seeking forgiveness for the wife like Moses did for the nation of Israel. And secondly, the righteous judge and ruler. Joseph ruling as second in command. David reuniting the 12 tribes and ruling over them. Do you know the name? That's what Moses said. What name do I give them? Proverbs, do you know the name of his son? You need to know the name of his son. Your eternal life and salvation depend on it. In Zechariah 12:10, we read, and this is talking about the Messiah. This is not talking about the woman Israel or the tribe of Judah. It says, and I will pour on the house of David. Who is the house of David? Judah. You're right. That is Judah. And on the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the spirit of grace and supplication. Then they, who is they? Judah will look on me, not Judah, whom they pierced. Yes, they, Judah, will mourn for him, not Judah, as one mourns for his only son, and grieve for him, not Judah, as one grieves for a firstborn, a firstling, a birthright. The firstborn who gets everything that belongs to the Father. Now we read in Genesis 3:21, also for Adam and his wife, Yah Elohim made tunics of skin and clothed them. So Adam and Eve made a covering of fig leaves, which were fashioned by their own hands. What they imagined was right, and they created it with their own hands. So they made it, meaning they fashioned, accomplished it, and here Yah made, fashioned, accomplished tunics, a covering for the man and the woman made of skin, which is hide, leather. And they were clothed, meaning they were properly wrapped about, implying to put on a garment or to clothe oneself or another. This is showing us that you cannot cover your nakedness and the shame of your sin and your transgressions with the work of your hands. Innocent blood must be spilt in order to cover transgression. A garment without innocent bloodshed and fashioned by your own hands will never cover your nakedness, the shame of the transgression of the word, the instructions of the Father. You cannot get back into covenant. You cannot have the fire in you through the work of your own hands. It's impossible. It's right here in Scripture. Any covering which does not require the innocent blood is unacceptable to cover nakedness and the shame of sin, whether you were deceived into committing the sin as the woman, she was blinded by her own lusts and flesh, or if you intentionally committed the sin, as did the Adam. The fig leaves represent the attempt of mankind to create their own covering through their own works. Your works are useless. They mean nothing. The problem is that once the commandment was broken, the law of sin and death entered, and mankind could not save himself, even by never eating from the tree of the learning of good and evil ever again. King David even talks about it. He says, "Behold, I was brought forth in iniquity, and in sin, transgression of the law, my mother," who was his mother? Israel, "conceived me." He was conceived in sin, in the earth, the dust of the earth, even though he never ate from the tree of the learning of good and evil. Note that neither Moses or Aaron or Joshua resolved the problem of sin and iniquity in the carnal nature, the nature we get from being made from the dust of the earth, the lowliest parts of the earth. And in the 1st century BCE, Judah was waiting expectantly for their Messiah ben Joseph to appear during the Second Temple era, before the Second Temple was destroyed. So once the covenant of fire was broken, the only way back into the covenant with Yah Elohim is being covered in the blood of the sacrifice that only Yah Elohim could provide. Once you are covered in the blood of Yah's atonement, then His Spirit can fill your earthly vessel, producing His fire or His light from within, empowering you to abide, meaning to serve as a bondservant by choice, and shamar, to guard, to hear the Master's instructions of Yah Elohim. Yeshua is that fire. He is the light that fills us. And we are in the house of the Son of the covenant of fire, the Son of the ruler. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. John 1:4. And this is the condemnation, that light is come into the world, and men loved darkness. They loved being outside of the covenant rather than the light of being in the covenant. Why? Because their deeds were evil. They were focused on evil continually, the things of the world, the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the desire to see everything through this man-made logic, the false construct that we have. about what is important and what we should be focusing on. We have to listen, Shema, to Yeshua's own words. Not what someone tells you he said, but read and Shema for yourself, because you will be held accountable for every word spoken by Yeshua. He says, "Behold, thou art made whole. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come unto thee." This is in John 5:14. What is he saying? Sin no more. You don't have a license to sin just because I came and forgave you. He says to the adulterous woman that is brought to him, "Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee?" She said, "No man, Master." And Yeshua said unto her, "Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more." Who is this adulterous woman who deserved to be condemned to death? And where is the man who must stand in judgment beside her, the other guilty party? She stands alone before her accusers and Yeshua. So who is this man who instead casts judgment in the place of the husband, and rather than casting blame and accusing her, covers the sin, forgives the sin, and then tells her to go and sin no more? Notice that this man frees the woman from the unjust accusers, but he warns her, sin no more. Forgiveness is not a license to sin. If you repent and you are filled with the Spirit, you have been given the power to overcome the accuser and the lusts of the flesh and the things of the world. If you are not doing that, it's because you are not walking in the power, the fire within you. You are focusing on the things of the world, and you will start to lose your fear of Yah. This picture is very clear. Israel and her sister Judah whored after other husbands. They committed adultery. But through Yeshua, the Holy One of Israel, the kinsman redeemer, the wife can be forgiven. Go, Israel, and sin no more. We read here in John chapter 12, verses 44 through 50. Yeshua cried and said, "He that believeth on me, believeth not on me, but on him that sent me." Who sent him? The Father. "And he that seeth me, seeth him that sent me." Who sent him? The invisible Elohim. "I am come a light into the world, that whoever believeth on me should not abide in darkness." Darkness. He came as a light into the world, so there wouldn't be darkness anymore. Creation, day one, let there be light. "And if any man hear my words and believe not, I judge him not. For I came not to judge the world, but to save the world." He came as Messiah ben Joseph. "He that rejecteth me and receiveth not my words hath one, echad, one, that will judge him. The word that I have spoken, the same shall judge him in the last day. For I have not spoken of myself, but the Father which sent me, he gave me a commandment, what I should say and what I should speak. He is the prophet like Moses. And I know that his commandment is life everlasting. Whatsoever I speak, therefore, even as the Father said unto me, so I speak. He gave him a commandment which is life everlasting, because the first Adam brought death. The second Adam brings life everlasting as the Messiah ben Yosef, to bring compassion and forgiveness. A picture of what Moses did for Israel in the wilderness. From the Adam to Moses and the mixed multitude to Yeshua, Yah Elohim has offered entry into the covenant of fire as a free gift to all of mankind through the shedding of blood. The works of your hands will not save you. Yah provides the sacrifice. How can Yah Elohim be a respecter of persons or genealogies alone when the original covenant was with the Adam and the wife and their seed, their descendants? Who did all of mankind come through? We all came through the Adam and the wife. The woman, Israel's duty, its highest calling by Yah Elohim, was to bring forth the long-desired Messiah to all the nations of the world, to the Gentiles, to the Goyim, so that all of mankind could have the opportunity, the choice, to enter into covenant again with Yah Elohim. It's not just for Israel so that she can be avenged somehow and rule over her oppressors. Elohim forbid. Is that the perspective of the dust of the earth or of the Spirit of Elohim? The Spirit of Elohim has a higher purpose. We read in Ephesians 2:14 through 18, "For he is our peace, who hath made both one and hath broken down the middle wall of partition between us, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, even the law of commandments contained in ordinances, in dogma, for to make in himself of twain," that's two, "one new man, so making peace, and that he might reconcile both unto Elohim in one body by the cross, having slain the enmity thereby, and came and preached peace to you which were afar off, and to them that were near. For through him we both have access by one Spirit unto the Father." The Spirit that was breathed into Adam, the covenant of fire, we all have access to it. Now that word, the commandment, the law of commandments contained in ordinances, this is not talking about the Torah. The Torah doesn't have dogma. Dogma is doctrines, decrees of a ruling body, like the Roman Senate or the Sanhedrin or the Congress of the United States. Dogmas are man-made. They are not from the Creator. They are not his Torah and instruction. Who makes commandments in the form of dogma? Mankind. "Thou shalt not even touch the fruit, lest we die." That is a dogma. That is not a commandment. So Shema Israel, this was all prophesied in the opening chapters of Genesis. You must know the name of the Messiah. Your life, your eternity depends on knowing his name, repenting of your sins, turning away from sin, which means you got to know what sin is. Have you read the Bible to see what Yah says is sin? Don't do that anymore. You need to know that too. You need to repent, and you need to know what to repent of, and you need to know what to turn away from and not do anymore, because you've been filled with the Spirit, and now you have the power to walk in perfection with the Father. Perfection meaning maturity, not as a toddler throwing a temper tantrum because you can't do what you want. Is there anything that the Father has asked of us that is nothing compared to the free gift that he's offered us? Was eating of all the trees in the garden except for one too much to ask? Interesting that it's food, isn't it? Food, people do not like to have their food messed with. You could have eaten any tree in the garden but one tree, and food tripped them up, because guess what? It tasted good, it was prudent, it was food, it was delicious. Why not eat it? Because the Father said don't. Abide and shamar, hear the Master and serve him only. And that means we put down our flesh and we focus on the Spirit of Elohim that is within us now. We are now lamps burning in the night. We are a light on a hill. We are not to put our light under a bushel. And that means that we must choose to walk in obedience to the Father, because he has given us a gift that is invaluable, that we could never have earned. Never. So, Yah willing, we will pick up again in chapter 4 with Cain and Abel in our next study. Thank you so much for joining me.